Hey, what's going on, everyone? So lately I got asked what you should know before moving on to a framework like, for example, React. Actually, the general question, what should I know before moving on to a framework? Well, first of all, you should know HTML and CSS and also JavaScript, obviously. But then he asked what specifically is important from JavaScript, because JavaScript is so vast and also CSS is so vast. Now, a really important thing from JavaScript would be destructuring, because destructuring you will encounter so often in frameworks like React, for example, that it is essential to know destructuring before moving on to a framework. So I thought to myself, let's just go through what destructuring is, and let's give a couple of examples for arrays and objects, and I think you should get the grip of destructuring before, well, I'm actually going to show it in JavaScript, not in React. But before we get started with the video, if you're new to my channel, then please consider subscribing if you wish to learn more about web development. Also, I post content like this on a regular basis, actually on a weekly basis. So if you wish to get constantly updated when I post new videos like this, then also click that notification bell in order to get notified whenever I have new content. Also, if you enjoyed the video, then please consider giving a thumbs up button, liking it, and also sharing it with others who would consider this information useful. If you have any kind of questions or suggestions, then please consider leaving them down in the comment section below, or get in touch with me on social media. You can also follow my blog where I upload all of my content, including this video right here, with the entire code. So let's get started with the video. Okay, so first things first, what is destructuring? The destructuring assignment syntax is a JavaScript expression that makes it possible to unpack values from arrays or properties from objects and then put them into distinct variables. So first things first, let's start with arrays. Let's type in here comment destructuring, and let's get started with arrays. So let's start out by creating an array of cars. Let's go with a const cars, and let's type in here first car Tesla, then BMW, then Audi, and Ferrari. You know what, actually let's include also Ford. Now usually if you wish to get something from an array, so I'm just going to console log here cars first of all. Usually if I would wish to get something from an array, I would do, let's say we want to get Tesla, so I would do 0, that would get Tesla. If I wish to get BMW, then 1. Or if I wish to get Ford, then this would be the fourth one. And there we go. Now you could also do something like assign each value from this array to a variable. So I could do something like const, and let's say Tesla. So I'm going to extract Tesla from this array and assign it to the variable of Tesla. So we do cars, and from the cars I'm going to select 0. And now if I would console log Tesla down here, there I would get Tesla. Obviously it's the same thing for BMW, and this would be number 1 then in the array, and I would get BMW if I console log BMW, obviously. And I could also get more than 1 by, let's say, const Tesla and BMW, and do something like cars and get BMW and get the first one, and then plus open string, then another plus sign, and then cars, and get the first one. And if I would console log now Tesla BMW, I have just extracted from this array into this variable Tesla and BMW and put them in here. Now this is obviously not that helpful, so let me show you how we would destructure the array of cars. Okay, so let's type in here destructure cars. So this is pretty simple. We're just going to create a const, and because this is an array, we're going to start out with square brackets. Now just type in here a named variable which will represent the first one, then the second one, and so forth and so on. So if I wish to get, for example, car 1, comma, then the next one car 2, and I will set on the right side the array, so equal to arrays. And this just means I'm going to get from this array, okay, from this array, the very first 2 objects. Now, if I would console log now cars, then I would get, wait a second, not this cars, car 1 and car 2, then I would get Tesla and BMW exactly as I did up here. Now, let's say I wish to get Tesla, BMW, and Ferrari. Okay, and exclude Audi, because if I would do something like here car 4, then I wouldn't get, and console log it also, then I wouldn't get Ferrari because I would get Audi. Now in order to get Audi instead of, in order to get Ferrari instead of to get Audi, I need to skip one. So this is pretty simple. Just type in here another comment, and now this is going to be the fourth one. Okay, so let's move on now to assignment separate from declaration. This just means I could do something like initiate a let C1 and C2, which will be just car1 and car2. Go down here, and now I'm just going to create I'm just going to create an open and close square bracket C1, C2, so extract car1 and car2 from cars. And now if I would console log C1 and C2, I should get Tesla and BMW again. This just means I initiated here two variables, and then I assigned without creating this const, and I just destructured C1, C2 from the array of cars. Okay, now let's talk a bit about default value and assignment separate from declaration. Now a variable can be assigned its value via destructuring separate from the variable's declaration. Now if this sounds confusing, don't worry, I'm just going to show you how. For example, if I would take our variables C1 and C2 again, so C1, C2, and let's just set them equal to an empty array. Now I could go in here in C1 and C2, and let's assign C1 7 and C2 8. Now if I would console log C1 and C2 again, I would get 7 and 8. So I can reassign variables in the destructured form new values. Now I could also give them default values. So for example, a variable can be assigned a default value in case that the value unpacked from the array is undefined. So I could just assign here a 9. Let's hit save, and now instead of C1 equals 7, I would get 9, because the first value in this array is now 9. Or if I would change, or if I would now enter a 10, then instead of 7 and 8, I would get 9 and 10. Okay, I hope this is clear. So let's move on to parsing an array returned from a function. It's always been possible to return any array from a function. Destructuring can make working with an array return value more concise. Now in the following example, I'm just going to create a function and I'm going to return two values. So for example, if I would create here a function, let's call it numbers, and let's just return an array with 1, 2, and 3. Okay, pretty simple, 3 numbers in an array, and this function should return these 3 numbers. So if I would initiate here in a console log the function of numbers, okay, I would get my array with 1, 2, 3. So now let's comment this one out. Let's move down here. I also have prettier installed. This is why it's auto formatting. Prettier is just an extension. Go to extension, search for prettier. It's going to auto format your text. Okay, now let's destructure this function. Let's say const, and I'm going to extract from it number 1. So let's just call it num1, and let's actually skip 1 and num2. And this is going to be from the function numbers, and initiate the function here. Now if I would console log now num1, then I would get 1. If I would console log 2, what do you think I would get? Is it 2 or 3? It's 3, because we skipped 1. And now obviously I could reassign it. Let's just say const, and let's say I would destructure numbers, and the first one would be C, and numbers. And now if I console log C, I would get 1 again. Okay, so now I showed you how you can destructure one number, skip one number, extract from functions. Now let's see how can we, for example, get 1 or 2 things from an array and then skip the rest. Now there's actually something called assigning the rest of an array to a variable, and this just means that when destructuring an array, you can unpack and assign the remaining part of it to a variable using the rest pattern, aka the spread operator. So let me show you how this works. For example, I'm just actually going to initiate here the destruction part, and I'm going to say A, and here I'm going to assign the array. So the array will be 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Now if I were just to console log A, obviously I would get 1. If I wish to skip the rest but still have them in a variable, then I would do comma dot dot dot, so 3 dots, and just give it any kind of name. You could give it, for example, the name of rest. Now if I would also console log, just copy this to have both of them, the rest, now I would get back an array with the rest of the initial array's elements, so remaining elements of the initial array. And I would get back another array, so you can see I'm getting back another array actually. Now let's do, for example, a const here of a mixed array. So let's call this mixed array, and let's just create here a couple of numbers, 1 and 2, and then a couple of strings, say Tesla, another string of Audi, and then 2 booleans of true and false. Now I could actually do something like just destructure everything and skip everything and just get in a spread operator the rest, which are the booleans from the mixed array. And if I would now console log bool, I would get back true and false. Okay, so I just showed you how you can just destructure the rest of an array and without selecting any kind of other elements. Now let's move on to objects, because objects is where destructuring really shines. So let's type in here another comment, objects, and let's move up here. So let's create a very basic object. Let's create a const user. We're going to set this to an object of user ID. Let's say 42, and then we will also give this, typing here a capital I, is verified. And let's set this to true. So if I wish to destructure and get user ID and is verified from that object, I could just do const, just like we did with our arrays. So let's just type here. Now the difference is that when you destructure an object, you need to set everything that you destructure into curly braces. So user ID, and I also wish to get is verified. And we're going to get this from the user object. So now I have access to both of user ID, which is 42. You know what? I'm just going to actually comment out everything else that we got up there. This is not going to mess with our code here. And then we could also extract is verified. Okay, so just have access to both of them. Now let's do also a assignment without declaration. So let's just initiate here a let of A and B. Now after I have A and B, I'm just going to create an open and close parenthesis. Within the left side, I'm going to insert what we're destructuring, so A and B. And I'm going to set this equal to, and now I can give A and B values. So A, let's say value 1, and B, value 2. And now if I would console log A, I would get 1, and if I would console log B, I would get 2. So pretty simple. Now let's move on, and I'm actually going to show you how you can get within an object the information from another object. So let's create here a const with the name of user1. I'm going to assign this to an object, and this user is going to have a name. This name is going to be Norbert. What a wonderful name, Norbert. Do you know somebody named Norbert? I do. And then Norbert is going to have an age, 35, which may or may not be Norbert's real age. And Norbert is going to have an address. And within here, we're going to create another object. It's going to have a key value pairs of city and the string of the city. And then we're going to have a street. And the street is going to be Elm Street, where all the wonderful dreams happen. So let's start getting a couple of things from here. So let's start destructuring by assigning this a const. We're going to destructure the name and the age from the user1. So if I wish to have access to the name, so I'm just going to console log name and then age. So both of them. So Norbert 35. So just got my name and age from this user1. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can assign to new variable names. Now a property can be unpacked from an object and assigned to a variable with a different name than the object property. So for example, if I would do const and I would extract here name again, so the structure name, and now I can change it, let's say first name. So now if I, and let's also get age from user1, obviously. Now if our age already been declared, I'm not declaring here age, because I have this still active. And where do I still have it active, verified, and here. So we don't need this. We're actually going to, yeah. So console log, and I'm going to get, now instead of calling on name from here, we can now call upon first name. Now if I would hit save, then I'm going to get Norbert, although I called upon first name, not name. And this just means that now I have access to this through using first name. And obviously we can still have access to age. So Norbert 35. Okay, now let's talk about default values. A variable can be assigned a default value in case that the value unpacked from the object is undefined. So let's say we wish to give Norbert a date of birth, and I don't want to include it here, but I could do something like, if I destructure Norbert, so let's say const, and we had our name, which was first name, and then we had our age, and now we could actually give it a DOB, date of birth. I'm going to set this equal to February the 15th, so Feb 15th and comma 1986, and this would be obviously from the user 1. So if I would console log now, first name, age, and DOB, that I would get Norbert 35, February the 15th, 1986. Now I could also change values. For example, if I would change the name, you can see const first name is a string, and I could replace this with another name. So within here, I could now replace this. I set it equal to Laura. And if I do this and comment out Norbert, then instead of Laura, not 0, instead of Norbert, I would get Laura. Okay, so now let's also try a rest. For example, let's get another user. So const, let's call this user2, and if I copy now, just going to give this a ID of 13, a name of mbm, and then a full name, which will be composed of another object with the first name being Norbert, and then the last name, just going to scroll up, will be Manhart. Now let's say that I wish to get the ID and the rest of the information. So we will do something like const, because open and close curly brackets, ID and ... the spread operator rest info. And of course from the user 2. So when we console log our ID, we get 13, and if we wish to get the rest of the info, then I will do something like ID, and within here rest info, and I will get 13 and nick and everything else that was in the array. So what if we wish to unpack fields from an object and pass them as a function parameter? So let's do something. I'm just going to create here function, the name function, and let's say we wish to extract the user ID. So this function will only return the user ID. Okay, now within here I would do my destructuring. So where I would normally pass in a argument, I could just pass in the ID, and this will just return a ID. Okay, so let's try this out by doing a console log, and now we wish to call upon this function, so user ID, and now we can pass in from user2, so we will pass in the actual object within this function, and this function will destructure this object and extract from it whatever we passed in here as an argument. So if I hit save, then I'm going to get 13 again. And let me give you another example for, let's say we're going to create a function, and let's say that this nick should be equal to the full name. Okay, so let's do something like, let's give it a silly name, let's say who is, and in who is we're going to destructure the nick, so the nickname, and the full name, which will be last name, and it's going to pass in a name here. And now we wish to return here a template literal, a template string with nick is, and we're going to pass in here the name. So now if I would console log who is, I'm going to pass in here user2, then mbn is Manhart. Need here space. Okay everyone, so hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something from it. Destructuring is it's pretty useful, as you can see, and before you move on to anything like React, please consider learning Destructuring. So once again, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed my video. Subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, share this video, and catch you next time. Bye bye.